Two officers escorted a quiet black man into the courtroom, snickering at his name and mocking his silence. But everything changed when he calmly placed an FBI badge on the judge's bench, turning the entire room on its head. When the bailiff called, "Leonard Briggs," he barely looked up. A quiet ripple of curiosity moved through the courtroom, but no one reacted until a tall, clean-shaven black man in a rumpled gray suit rose from the back row. He walked steadily down the aisle, no lawyer beside him, no briefcase, no entourage. Just him. Two officers at the rear leaned in toward each other. "That him?" one whispered. "Gotta be. Look at him," the other replied. "Probably one of those fake sovereign citizens, gonna tell the judge the law doesn't apply to him." They laughed quietly, just loud enough to draw a few glances. Leonard didn't react. His face was expressionless, too still, like he'd lived this scene before. On the bench sat an older white judge, hair combed thinly across his head, his voice carrying the polished tone of an aging local radio host. The judge adjusted his glasses and glanced down at the file in front of him. "Mr. Briggs," he said, flipping a page, "you're being charged with failure to comply during a lawful stop. Is that correct?" Leonard replied calmly, "That's what the report says." "And you have no legal counsel present today?" "I don't need one." A few chuckles rippled from the back of the room. The judge shot a quick glance at the officers but said nothing. The courtroom was taut with just enough tension to make everyone feel it, yet not enough to disrupt the proceedings. "Very well," the judge continued. "This appears to be a minor infraction, so we'll keep this brief. Mr. Briggs, is there anything you'd like to say before we proceed?" Leonard stepped forward slowly. He reached into his coat. One of the officers at the rear rose slightly, his hand hovering near his holster. Leonard paused. Then, deliberately, he pulled out a slim laminated badge and placed it gently on the judge's bench. "My name is Leonard D. Briggs," he said, his voice steady and calm. "Director of Internal Affairs, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The courtroom fell utterly silent. The judge stared at the badge, stunned. His mouth opened, then closed again, speechless. The officer who had started to rise sat back down, eyes wide. His partner looked at Leonard like he'd just watched someone do the impossible. "You're with the FBI?" the judge finally asked. Leonard remained still. "Internal Affairs. I oversee misconduct investigations across the southeastern region, including departments that disable body cameras during traffic stops." The room was so quiet you could hear papers shift, someone cough, a pen drop. The judge cleared his throat, leaning back slowly in his chair. "Would you mind stepping into my chambers for a moment, Mr. Briggs?" Leonard shook his head. "I'd prefer to keep everything on the record. Full transparency." One of the officers stood, stammering, We didn't know who he was." Leonard turned toward them, not aggressively, just observantly. "You didn't ask," he said, and the silence that followed didn't last long, because behind closed doors and parted lips, word spreads fast. This time, the trouble was heading straight for the top. It was just after 10:30 p.m. when Leonard exited Highway 45 near Biloxi, Mississippi. He'd been driving all day, making stops at small police departments throughout the Gulf region. Departments flagged for suspicious activity, inconsistent use of force records, questionable reports, and most recently, a troubling pattern of body cams malfunctioning during critical incidents. He was behind the wheel of a silver Toyota Camry, a plain, unremarkable rental chosen specifically for its anonymity. Leonard never advertised who he was. He preferred to observe quietly, unnoticed. That night, he was on his way to a modest motel off Bayou View Drive when flashing red and blue lights lit up behind him. He sighed, pulled over, and eased onto the shoulder. In the rearview mirror, he watched as two white officers exited the cruiser, mid-30s, one with a shaved head, flashlight already in hand. They didn't approach cautiously. The bald officer rapped hard on the driver's window without a greeting. "License and registration." Leonard rolled the window halfway down. "What's the reason for the stop, officer?" "License, registration," the cop repeated, his tone sharper. "You didn't use your blinker on that last lane change?" Leonard glanced at the dash cam, catching its reflection in the rearview mirror. "I'm pretty sure I did." "You got something to hide?" the second officer asked, appearing suddenly at the passenger side. "No," Leonard answered calmly. "But I'd like to know if this is a traffic stop or an interrogation." That didn't go over well. The bald officer leaned in, voice tight. "You giving me attitude? Step out of the vehicle." "I haven't refused anything. I asked a question." "Step out. Now." Leonard remained still. He handed over his license. "Leonard Briggs." No mention of the FBI. Just a clean, unassuming ID from Montgomery, Alabama. It wasn't enough. "Where are you headed?" The first officer pressed. "Can't say. You can't or you won't?" Leonard met his gaze. "Federal protocol." That was the spark. The bald officer's face twisted. "What the hell's that supposed to mean? You think you're above the law?" Leonard didn't answer. The second officer opened the passenger door. "Get out of the car! Now!" Leonard's voice stayed low, steady, unshaken. This stop was no longer lawful, and Leonard knew it. But the officers didn't care. They yanked him from the car with force, rough and deliberate. He didn't resist, but that didn't stop them from twisting his arm behind his back and shoving him to the ground. One officer jammed a knee into his spine, while the other barked into his radio, calling it in as refusal to comply. Leonard didn't yell. He didn't beg. He simply stared at the gravel beneath his cheek, committing every word they spoke to memory. What the officers didn't know was that Leonard had switched on a small audio recorder hidden in his coat pocket the second the patrol lights lit up. It was second nature by now, a habit born of experience, the kind men who looked like him had to develop, especially in the Deep South. By the time they dragged him into the local precinct, a report had already been thrown together. It claimed Leonard had been verbally aggressive and refused to disclose his destination. There was no mention of their loaded questions, no acknowledgement of the excessive force, and of course no body cam footage, another malfunction. When Leonard asked for the arresting officer's badge number, he was met with a cold stare and a smirking response. "Don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to ask questions in court." He spent the night in a holding cell. No phone call, no supervisor, just a flickering overhead light and the smug satisfaction of an officer who thought the matter was settled. But it wasn't. Not even close. Because the courtroom they dragged him into wasn't just a place to press charges, it was where the real trial would begin. And this time, they were the ones under the microscope. The silence that followed Leonard placing his FBI credentials on the judge's bench wasn't ordinary. It was heavy, suffocating. No one moved. The snickering from the back had vanished. The officer with the shaved head sat rigid, eyes flicking between Leonard and the badge like he'd just seen a ghost. The judge cleared his throat, but his voice wavered slightly. "Mr. Briggs, are you claiming to be with the FBI?" Leonard didn't so much as blink. "Not claiming?" he said evenly. "I am." He nodded toward the badge. "You can confirm it with Director Travis McCall's office or the office of the Inspector General in D.C. One of the clerks, a woman named Darlene, had already started typing. With 30 years on the job and a sharp instinct for courtroom tension, the court clerk rose slowly. "Your Honor," she said, "would you like me to make that call?" The judge replied almost too quickly, "Yes, please." Leonard stepped back, giving them space. The entire courtroom held its breath. Even a restless toddler in the gallery had gone completely still. No one knew what was coming next. One of the officers, the one who had dragged Leonard from the car, leaned toward his partner and whispered, "No way. This guy's playing us." The other shook his head slightly. "That badge looked real. The ID too. This might be legit." "Then we're screwed." Leonard heard everything. He didn't react. His eyes stayed on the judge, who now appeared noticeably smaller behind the imposing bench. 5 minutes later, the clerk returned, clutching a notepad and chewing the inside of her cheek. "Confirmed," she said, without even glancing at the officers. "He's FBI, Internal Affairs, Southeastern Division, 27 years of service, rank verified." Another silence fell over the room. But this time, it wasn't from laughter or disbelief. It was the quiet of shame. The judge's eyes shifted uneasily. The officer's breathing grew shallow. The prosecutor suddenly looked lost for words. Leonard finally spoke. "I didn't come here to cause a scene," he said, voice calm and even. "I wasn't here to file a complaint. I was traveling off record, assigned to review several departments currently under internal investigation." He glanced around the courtroom. "I didn't volunteer my FBI credentials because I wasn't obligated to. I followed the law, gave my license, remained calm, and for that, I was assaulted, thrown to the ground, detained without cause, and denied my rights. But I recorded everything, and I know exactly which procedures were violated." His voice didn't rise, but it filled the room. The judge leaned back, fingers interlaced tightly, tension in his jaw. "Mr. Briggs, I'm not here for an apology," Leonard interrupted. "I'm here to request that all charges against me be dropped immediately, and that both arresting officers be placed on temporary administrative leave, effective at once, pending a federal investigation." The prosecutor began to speak, but the judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Granted." The courtroom was stunned. The two officers sat in disbelief, realizing this wasn't the end of a traffic stop. It was the beginning of accountability. "You're suspending us, just like that?" The bald officer blurted out, his voice nearly breaking into a shout. The judge didn't respond. Leonard turned to face them fully. "This isn't about me," he said, voice calm but unwavering. "It's about every person you've treated like they didn't matter. Every citizen who didn't have a badge to flash. I do, and I still ended up face down in the dirt." One of the officers stepped forward, defensive. "Look, we didn't know who you were, all right? If we'd known..." Leonard raised a hand, cutting him off. "That's exactly the problem." But he wasn't finished, not even close. The badge may have silenced the courtroom, but the truth was still buried beneath falsified reports, missing footage, and systems designed to protect the wrong people. As the hearing wrapped, the gallery cleared fast, like they'd just witnessed something too volatile to be near. The courtroom emptied in minutes. The two officers stood near the door, stunned, pale, speechless. Neither reached for their phone, neither tried to explain. They just stood frozen in the weight of what had happened. What couldn't be undone. Outside, the thick humidity of the Mississippi morning clung to everything. Leonard didn't linger. He walked straight to his rental car, slid into the driver's seat, and finally, exhaled. These moments never felt like victory. They weren't satisfying. They were heavy, because every time it meant someone else had failed. Not far away, in a small sheriff's office down the road, Sheriff Ricky Halburn sat at his desk when the call came through. He held the phone to his shoulder, disbelief spreading across his face. "FBI?" he said. "That guy was FBI?" Deputy Tamara Wells stood by the door, arms crossed, face unreadable. She'd already seen the arrest report, something about it. Had felt off from the beginning. "Yes, sir," came the voice on the line. "Leonard Briggs, Internal Affairs." Ricky rubbed his forehead and let out a frustrated breath. "You're telling me 2 of my men arrested a federal investigator and dragged him into court without even checking his credentials?" "Yes, sir." He slammed the phone down and turned to Tamara. "Why the hell didn't anyone tell me he was FBI?" She lifted an eyebrow. "Maybe because no one treated him like one." Back at the courthouse, the judge held a quiet meeting. No recorders. No minutes. Just closed doors and anxious conversations, just whispers behind closed doors, flushed faces, and a growing fear about what might make headlines. Leonard, meanwhile, was already back at his motel, sitting on the edge of the bed, laptop open, a secure line buzzing softly. When the call connected, the voice on the other end was steady. Professional. You all right? I'm fine, Leonard replied. But they're not. Talk to me. Leonard laid out everything: the traffic stop, the aggression, the mysteriously inactive body cams, the overnight detention with no phone call or due process. A long sigh followed. This the first report from that department? No, Leonard said. We've had 3 others in the last year and a half. All complaints dropped. One plaintiff even moved out of state. Then it's time, the voice said. Make it official. Start the inspection. Leonard nodded instinctively, even though the other man couldn't see him. You want me to keep it quiet? Not anymore. Later that afternoon, Officer Curtis Dell, the one with the shaved head, tried to get ahead of the fallout. He showed up at the station acting casual, but everyone could see the shift, the forced ease in his walk, the way he avoided Tamara's eyes. He knocked on the sheriff's office door. You got a minute? Ricky Halburn didn't look up. Better make it short. Look, Curtis began. I didn't know who he was. I don't care if he was a garbage man or a ghost, Curtis. Ricky's voice was low, steady. He didn't threaten you. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't take a single step without giving you space, and you still dragged him in like some street thug. Curtis stepped inside. I panicked. He was vague, talking about federal protocol. We've seen guys try to pass off fake IDs before. Ricky stared at him. And when he handed over a real license, you just threw that out too? Curtis didn't answer. He looked at the floor. Do you understand what happens if the DOJ decides to send a team down here? Ricky asked, leaning forward. I screwed up, Curtis muttered. Tamara walked in mid-conversation, arms crossed. You didn't just screw up. You put all of us in the spotlight, and maybe that's exactly where we belong. Curtis turned to her, shocked. You serious? I'm tired, she said, of reading reports that don't match the body cam files. I'm tired of watching people leave here more broken than when they came in, Tamara said quietly. Ricky still didn't speak. He just sat there, jaw clenched, phone in hand, staring into the kind of silence that signaled something big was coming. He knew it. How much was about to surface, how much had been buried for too long. And if they thought the worst was behind them, they hadn't seen the file Leonard had just opened on his laptop. It was a list, names, dates, red flags, stretching back years. Sitting at the small motel desk, Leonard's fingers moved steadily over the keyboard. His eyes were sharp, locked in. He didn't blink often. He wasn't driven by anger or frustration. Emotion muddied the process. This was methodical, cold, focused. He was building a timeline. Leonard knew what came next. He'd seen it too many times. The sudden excuses, the scrambling, the conveniently timed technical issues. He accessed the department's official portal and submitted a formal request for body cam footage from the night of his arrest. The request was exact, time-stamped, professional, clinical. He didn't even have to wait an hour. The response arrived by email. Short, defensive. We regret to inform you that the body camera footage from the incident on May 14th is unavailable due to a technical malfunction. We are currently reviewing maintenance logs to determine the cause of the failure. Leonard leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. Not a sigh, just acknowledgement. A pattern confirmed. Another red flag for a folder that was growing by the hour. He picked up the phone and called the DOJ's regional evidence contact, requesting a data audit on the department's body cam software logs. 10 minutes later, the analyst had an answer. They've reported 6 outages in the past. 10 months, the analyst said. Everyone during stops involving Black or Latino drivers. Not a single one during routine traffic violations with white motorists or during internal training exercises. Leonard didn't flinch. He just typed. Back at the department, tension hung heavy in the air. Officer Curtis Dell sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen like it might break under the weight of what he now understood. Across the room, Tamara was digging through archived case files, old reports no one had touched in years. Her eyes narrowed as she clicked into one dated December. A young man, just 3 blocks from home, stopped and allegedly roughed up. He filed a complaint. The body cam had malfunctioned. Then another case. Same story, and another, Tamara's. Eyes narrowed as she scrolled through the reports. They really thought no one would notice, she muttered. In the back of the department, Brian, the quiet IT tech who mostly kept to himself, received a discreet message through the internal Yale chat system. Hey, check the camera logs from May 14th. Briggs case. Who accessed the files before they vanished? Brian hesitated. He didn't like being dragged into these kinds of things, but curiosity edged out discomfort. He tapped a few keys, ran a trace, and within seconds, the answer appeared: Dell. Not once, twice. 2 hours after the arrest. Then again the following morning. Deleted entry logs. Review flags bypassed. Brian stared at the screen, processing what that meant. Then quietly, he printed the log, slid it into an envelope, and delivered it by hand to Tamara's desk. She opened it, jaw tightening. "Thanks," she said under her breath. Brian didn't answer. He just turned and walked away. By the next morning, Leonard walked into the department in the same gray suit, holding a small manila folder. The front desk officer froze, looking like he'd just seen a hurricane in human form. Agent Briggs," the man stammered. "We weren't expecting you." "I'm not here to cause problems," Leonard said evenly. "I'm here to confirm patterns." He didn't wait for clearance. He moved with purpose, heading straight toward the operations wing. Staff stepped out of his way instinctively. He knocked once on the sheriff's office door and stepped in. Ricky looked up, eyes tired. "I assume you got our email?" Leonard placed the folder on the desk. "I also got access records." Ricky didn't move. "Someone entered the system," Leonard continued, "and manually deleted the body cam footage. After the arrest, before the arraignment. You want to take a wild guess who?" Ricky rubbed his eyes, weariness heavy in his voice. "We're looking into it." "No," Leonard said, voice calm but resolute. "You're not. I am." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "I suggest you have Officer Dell's badge and service weapon ready." By the end of the day, Leonard had made it clear. Internal. Affairs would be on site before the week was out. Ricky didn't argue. He didn't even lift his head. But as Leonard stepped back into the hallway, he knew Dell wasn't the only one who had left behind digital fingerprints. And this investigation wasn't just about one night anymore. It was about everything they had tried to keep buried. By Wednesday morning, 2 unmarked black SUVs rolled quietly into the rear lot of the Jefferson County Police Department. No lights, no fanfare, just presence, measured, deliberate. Leonard stepped out first, followed by 2 agents from D.C. Grace Mendoza, a sharp-eyed compliance strategist with a no-nonsense edge, and Nathan Cole, a digital forensics specialist, who rarely spoke unless the silence couldn't carry the weight. They hadn't come to make noise. They'd come to uncover truth. Inside, the mood had shifted. The same officers who used to strut through the halls now sat quietly behind their desks, their eyes flicking to the agents as they passed. The energy was brittle, watchful. Sheriff Ricky Halburn looked like he hadn't slept in days. Few people said more than a few words at a time, except for Leonard and his team. Grace took control of the records room, calmly requesting stacks of documentation, Disciplinary files, traffic stop records, internal evaluations, and previous IA investigations. Anything that left a paper trail. Meanwhile, Nathan joined Brian in the server room. The IT tech didn't protest. He simply handed over full access and stepped aside. Nathan said nothing, just nodded and began working. Leonard sat down with Tamara in a small office tucked in the back. She had a laptop open, multiple report windows arranged across the screen. Her face was tight with concentration. These all follow the same pattern, she said, scrolling. Pulled over, allegations of aggression, body cams off, vague write-ups, no follow-ups. Leonard nodded slowly. It's never just about one bad call. It's about the culture. What gets overlooked, what gets erased, what everyone else learns to call normal. Tamara turned her screen toward him. Look at this. May of last year. Man stopped after work. Said they asked him to get out of the car without cause. No citation. No arrest. Leonard scanned the report. Let me guess, non-compliant? She nodded. Same language, Leonard murmured. Every time. Down the hall, more silence. But this time, it wasn't just tension. It was anticipation. Something was unraveling. Grace walked into Ricky's office without knocking. I need your department's training materials on use of force, escalation protocols, and camera operation policies. Ricky looked like he was about to argue, but held back. Instead, he nodded toward a cabinet. Everything's in there. Take what you need. Grace opened the drawers, quickly scanning the documents before letting out a sigh. This is 4 years out of date. Ricky stayed silent. Meanwhile, Nathan worked swiftly, cloning files, extracting camera logs, recovering deleted footage, and reconstructing videos from backup systems the officers didn't even know existed. When he discovered 2 videos labeled incomplete, he flagged them immediately. One of them had audio, recorded from a patrol car. Got something? Leonard asked as Nathan handed over the headphones. Leonard listened closely. The clip was grainy but audible. Where are you headed? Can't say, can't or won't. Federal protocol. You think you're above the law? The sound of a door slamming, hurried footsteps, gravel scraping, and a grunt followed. Leonard looked up, determined. This is enough. He strode into Ricky's office, where Grace was still flipping through folders. We're issuing a compliance hold, Leonard announced firmly. No officer from this department will participate in field operations until this review is complete. Ricky leaned forward, voice low. You're shutting us down temporarily. Leonard met his gaze steadily. You'll keep dispatch running, emergencies only. But as of today, your department is under federal supervision. Ricky exhaled sharply through his nose. You know what this will do to us. Leonard didn't flinch. You know what not doing it already did. The door closed behind Leonard as he left. Downstairs, officers avoided his eyes, even those who'd never met him. Tamara met him at the base of the stairs. I pulled the complaint logs, she said. There's a pattern in the denials. Most reports were marked unfounded without a single interview. Leonard raised an eyebrow. She handed him the list, Curtis Dell's name appearing repeatedly. Leonard folded the paper, slipped it into his coat pocket, and headed for the door. Good work, he said. Tamara looked almost surprised. You think it'll change anything? Leonard paused at the threshold. That depends. Do you? But change wasn't just about paperwork. It hinged on how the town would react when everything was finally exposed. And by the end of the week, they'd have no choice but to confront it all. By Friday morning, the story had spread far beyond the courthouse steps. Local news stations picked it up first, small blurbs filled with speculation about an FBI official arrested in a wrongful stop. Then came the grainy video clip from the patrol car's mic, unmistakable audio playing in countless living rooms, barbershops, and church pews. The phrase federal protocol was no longer just words. It had become a question. What really happened at the Oakland Cafe? At a corner diner, a group of older men leaned over steaming mugs, speaking quietly but heatedly. "I'm telling you, they pulled that man over for no reason," one said. "Thought he was just another guy they could push around. If he didn't show ID, well, he did. License was clean, and even if he hadn't, that's no way to treat someone, no matter who they are." Across town, in the small community center, on Jefferson Avenue, a group of parents gathered unofficially after school. They were worn down, tired of coaching their kids on what to say, how to act if ever stopped by police. Tired of explaining that respect alone didn't guarantee safety. By late afternoon, a town hall meeting was called on short notice. The packed room buzzed with tension, some people angry, some confused, others simply seeking answers. The mayor, an older white man named Harold Lanning, stepped up to the podium with trembling hands. "We are aware of the investigation and are cooperating fully with federal authorities," he said. "Changes will be made." From the back of the room, a woman named Felicia Green stood. Her son had filed a complaint 2 years earlier that went nowhere. "Are you going to reopen all those old cases?" she asked sharply. She asked firmly. "Don't just look into it, act." Scattered but genuine applause broke out around the room. Leonard stood near the back with his arms crossed, not there to speak, but to listen. Tamara arrived halfway through and slid in beside him. "I didn't think this many people would show," she whispered. "They always do," Leonard replied, "when they stop fearing the silence." One by one, people stepped up to the mic. A teenage boy shared his story of being stopped while walking home from football practice. A single mother described being pulled over twice in the same week, questioned about whether the car was hers. An elderly man recounted a story no one had heard before, how in 1989 he'd been pulled over, cuffed, and released without a word. None of these stories had ever made the news, but tonight the room was silent and attentive. Then, unexpectedly, Sheriff Ricky approached the microphone. The crowd hushed immediately. He looked older than usual, maybe just worn down or exposed. "I've been in law enforcement 31 years, he began, "and I'd be lying if I said I haven't failed some of you." He paused, glanced at Leonard. "We didn't know who Mr. Briggs was, but that's not the problem. The problem is, we didn't care who any of you were. That's on me." Murmurs and nods rippled through the crowd. "We're going to reopen the dismissed complaints," he continued. "We'll work under federal oversight, and anyone involved in this pattern will be held accountable, including me." A woman near the front shouted, "Talk is cheap." Ricky nodded. "Then hold me to it." Leonard said nothing, but Tamara glanced at him. "Do you believe him?" she asked. "I believe the room," Leonard replied. After the meeting, people lingered outside in small groups, talking quietly. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but something had cracked open. And once that door is open, it can't be shut again. But accountability means nothing without consequences. Leonard had one last meeting to ensure that part wasn't forgotten. Monday morning, Leonard walked up the front steps of City Hall, file in one hand, coffee in the other. Leonard was scheduled for a closed-door meeting with Mayor Lanning, but when he arrived, 2 others were already inside. Tamara Wells, now officially reassigned as the department's liaison for federal oversight, and Grace Mendoza, seated beside her with a folder in hand. The mayor looked up as Leonard entered, offering a half-hearted smile. "Didn't expect this many visitors," he said. Leonard didn't respond to the smile. Instead, he opened the folder and laid it on the table. "These are the preliminary findings," he began. 5 confirmed violations of departmental policy, 3 cases of falsified reports, 2 incidents of body cam tampering, and 1 active attempt to obstruct a federal investigation. Lanning's hands clenched slightly. "Are you recommending prosecution?" Leonard didn't answer right away. He glanced at Grace, who gave a subtle nod. "We recommend a full personnel audit," Grace said firmly. "Effective immediately, and the removal of Officer Curtis Dell." The mayor exhaled slowly. "You're asking me to fire one of our most senior patrol officers. We're asking you to restore trust in a system that's been broken far too long," Leonard replied. Tamara leaned forward. "We're also asking you to make a choice. Protect a man who's buried complaints and doctored reports, or support the community that's demanding change." Lanning stared at the table, knowing there was no easy way out. No press release would fix this. No quiet suspension would satisfy the public accountability now demanded, spoken openly, on record. Finally, he nodded. "I'll issue the termination letter today." Leonard closed the folder and stood. "We will be monitoring compliance closely. Any further tampering or delays will be escalated to the Bureau." The meeting ended quietly, but its weight lingered as Leonard stepped outside. Instead of heading straight to his car, he took a slow walk through the nearby town square. People were out, some shopping, others sitting on benches, trying to make the day feel normal. At one corner, Leonard spotted a small group of high school students. One boy wearing a blue hoodie caught his eye and gave him a small nod. Just a nod. But unlike any Leonard had seen before, this one carried recognition, respect, not fear. Leonard returned the gesture quietly and continued on his way. At the department, Officer Dell was summoned to Ricky's office. No explanations, no arguments, just a printed notice from the mayor, marked effective immediately. Dell didn't shout or protest. He simply stared at the paper, then at Ricky. "So that's it?" he asked quietly. Ricky met his gaze. "You think it shouldn't be?" Dell's voice cracked. "I did what I thought was right. I didn't know." "You didn't care," Ricky replied bluntly. Dell left through the back door and wasn't seen again that day. Meanwhile, Tamara stood in the hallway, watching the department quietly shift around her. Some faces showed relief, others bitterness. But the change was happening, slow and steady. That evening, Leonard returned to finalize one last piece of the process. A meeting with the mayor, the sheriff, and 2 DOJ representatives to begin drafting new departmental protocols. Mandatory. Reviews, body cam audits, community reporting systems. No applause, no banners. Just the start of real work. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, Leonard made one last call. His voice was tired but steady. "Send me the next location." After a brief pause, he added, "Already," before packing. Up and driving away, Leonard sat quietly for a moment, reflecting, not on the title on his badge, but on how easy it is for people to forget that respect isn't about what you wear, what you drive, or the company you keep. It's about what you do when no one's watching, who you choose to be when the world assumes the worst. Sometimes, the lesson isn't in the noise, but in the silence that follows. In the way a room shifts when laughter stops, in the way a town pauses after years of pretending everything is fine. Leonard wasn't interested in speeches or headlines. What mattered was what people did when they thought no one would ever call them out. Back at the motel, he sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, phone buzzing with follow-ups from DC. He muted the notifications and leaned back, ready for what was next. Not out of defiance, but because he needed a brief moment, a small reminder of why this still mattered after all these years. It wasn't about seeking justice for himself. That wasn't the point. It was for those without a badge, the kid walking home from practice who didn't understand why he had to empty his backpack, the mother pulled over late at night watching her toddler cry in the back seat while her trunk was searched without. Cause the elderly man who never spoke of the officers who pinned him to his car hood back in '89, all for a simple rolling stop. None of them could say, "I work for the FBI." None had a recorder in their pocket. They just went home, or didn't. What Leonard did in that courtroom wasn't about proving power. It was about wielding it correctly, quietly, precisely, without anger or ego, but with clear purpose. Respect doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't come from uniforms or titles. It comes from recognizing someone's humanity before judging their worth. People laughed at Leonard when he entered the courtroom, mocking his appearance and their assumptions. But that moment didn't define him. It defined them. What came next wasn't just an investigation. It was a mirror reflecting the department, the town, and the system itself. Broken things don't get fixed by pretending they work. They get fixed by listening to the stories ignored, by holding people accountable, and by refusing to let another name vanish into a file marked unfounded. So if you've ever been underestimated, remember this: your silence is not weakness, and your calm is not surrender. Sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the heaviest burden, and if you ever have the chance to stand up for yourself, or for someone who can't, the badge doesn't make the man. It's the action that does. Leonard Briggs wasn't a hero. He didn't need to be. He just needed to do his job, completely and without compromise. Honestly, in a world where so many have forgotten what true integrity looks like, that alone is enough. If this story touched you, even just a little, don't let it end here. Share it, talk about it, ask questions, and hold your community to a higher standard. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button, because stories like this